Hello everyone. So today we're going to learn Parashat Toldot, and we continue now. If last week we spoke about establishing the link between Abraham and the future Am Israel through Yaakov, today we need to talk about the two children, Esau and Yaakov, and the parents, Yitzchak and Rivka. The Torah states, "Vayigdelu hane'arim," and the children grew up. Vayi Esav ish yodei tzayid ish sadeh, and Esav was a hunter, a man of the field. Yaakov, on the contrary, ish tam, a simple person. Let's just translate it as a simple person. Yoshev ohalim, dwells in tents. When you look at this narrative, this pasuk, without the midrashim, without what our sages tells us and what we learned since we were children, there is obviously something which should really call for our attention, which is, there is a stark difference between the two children. It's not like they have anything in common besides their parents. Esau is a man of the field, is a hunter, is someone who is always outside, for sometimes even for days, I would assume, because you go to a hunting trip and you need to hide somewhere to wait for the right animal to come, and then to schlep the animal with you. And you have Yaakov, who is someone who dwells in the tent, sits at home, doesn't really go too much to the outside nature. And sometimes that's fine, that's okay. But the Torah tried to give us a hint. Vayigdelu hane'arim. Only when they grew up, Esau became a hunter, and Yaakov stayed home. What was before they grew up? Were they the same? Were they different? And that difference just was shown really only later on in their life? So at the beginning, when they were children, before they became ne'arim, youth, but when they were little children, until the age of, let's say, 13, was Yaakov and Esau basically real twins and they did the same thing? What was before? Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, from the 11th century in France, one of the greatest commentators of the Torah and the Talmud, said the following: "Vayigdelu hane'arim vayi Esav," and only when the youth grew, Esau became a hunter and Yaakov sat in tents. Says Rashi, "Kol zman shayu ktanim," for the time that they were children, ktanim, לא היו ניכרים במעשיהם, ואין אדם מדקדק בהם מה טיבם. When they were children, you couldn't really recognize their deeds, that they were different. ואין אדם מדקדק בהם מה טיבם. They looked like twins. Probably they were dressed like twins, they acted like twins, which means they were the same. כיוון שנעשו בני 13 שנה, when they became 13 years old, ויגדלו הנערים, זה פירש לבתי מדרשות, וזה פירש לעבודה זרה. So Rashi, in the name of the Midrash, says, until the age of 13, until their bar mitzvah, they did the same thing. No one thought that they are any different. I mean, obviously, Esau looked a little different than Yaakov. They were not identical twins. But in terms of behavior, in terms of the way they carried themselves, the way, I guess, they were educated, it was the same. And only at the age of 13, there was this break. And Esau says, no, I am going to Avodah Zarah. And Yaakov says, I'm going to Beit Midrash. So obviously, we understand. The Midrash obviously tried to create this distinction between Esau, and then this is the reason why he was rejected, and Yaakov is the righteous one and the pious one. But today I would like to really try to focus from an educational angle, from the educational perspective. Rashi, in the name of the Midrash, delineates to us something that we need to give attention to, which is, what was the cause that generated that difference? You are telling me that until the age of 13 years old, they were the same, which means Esau didn't go and hunt. I guess he did whatever Yaakov did, and Yaakov didn't go to hunt, he did what Esau did. So they were both together until the age of 13. And then at the minute that there is this turn, they become 13, Esau becomes a totally different person than Yaakov. What exactly is going on here? In order to understand, perhaps, the cause of this transformative change in one of those children, take a look at Rabbeinu Avraham ben Rambam. Rabbeinu Avraham is the son of the Rambam, and in his Perush, in his commentary on the Torah, he says the following: ויגדלו הנערים, and the youth grew. עשיו נטה מדרך השם לבקשת העושר והשלטון והניצחון, כמו המלכים וכיוצא בהם. עשיו נטה, which means he is the one to deviate. We understand why we say that, but again, I'm not looking for now the historical or the religious reasons, but what I want to derive from this Perush, from this commentary, is that Esau was the one to deviate. Esau nata miderech Hashem. Esau deviated from the God's path, and he wanted what? A different path. Path that leads him to where? To osher, to wealth, for shilton, for domain, v'nitzachon, and victory. כמו המלכים וכיוצא בהם, like all the other kings around. די לך במה שאמרה התורה בנמרוד, הוא היה גיבור ציד. Rabbeinu Avraham ben Rambam says, if you're asking me, how do I know that? He says, because the only one that was a tzayad, that was a hunter, we know it was Nimrod. Nimrod, if you remember from one of the classes that we gave before, in Parashat Lech Lecha, we spoke about Nimrod, who threw Avraham to the fire because he couldn't tolerate someone who stands against him. Nimrod wanted to have the full domain over humanity. He was a gibor tzayid. Esau is trying to imitate not his father Yitzchak, but rather Nimrod. He thinks that he can find victory and fame where? Not following God's path, but rather Nimrod's path. ויעקב ישתם, שומר למה שנצטווה בו זקנו, יתהלך לפניי ויהיה תמים. Yaakov, what does it mean? Ishtam. What does that mean? Tam. So we translate it as simple. But Rabbeinu Avraham ben Rambam says, look, Avraham, when God told Avraham, he told him what? Et halech lefanai, walk in front of me, ve'ehyeh tamim, meaning someone who will not question me too much, or someone who will follow me. Yaakov does what exactly Avraham was told. So according to Rabbeinu Avraham ben Rambam, we see this very clear distinction between Esau and Yaakov. Yaakov and Esau, before they grew up, were educated that they should go and follow Abraham's path, which is God's path, which means tamim. You find your satisfaction and happiness by walking on God's path, which is kindness, justice, generosity, sensitivity, good values, brit milah, many other mitzvot that they were commanded, and that's it. Esau looked at that path and says, this is not for me. I want to find this glory and fame somewhere else. I can't find it here. It's so shallow. I need to find the victory, the fame, the glorification. I can't find it with Yaakov. I can't find it with Avraham's path. I need to find a different role model, which is Nimrod. So we might suggest that perhaps this was Esau's doings, meaning Esau looked at his educational system and on his schooling until the age of 13. At the age of 13, he starts wondering and he says, you know what? Is that the life that I want for myself? No, I don't think we can find glory and fame here. I think we need to do something else, much more active. I need to do something. I need to build. I need to hunt. I need to show my strength. I choose to deviate. So here, it was Esau's thinking. Esau's thought process basically led him to deviate. That's Rabbeinu Avraham ben Rambam. However, the Rashbam says, that's 11th century in France, sorry, really beginning of the 12th, Yoshev Ohalim, Yaakov was Yoshev Ohalim, dwell in tents, Ro'et tzon aviv. Yaakov was a shepherd, and Esau was a hunter. We obviously can already hear, and if we remember the first shiur in this series of classes about shepherds versus farmers. Yaakov was a shepherd. Esau was not a farmer, but he was a hunter, which means exactly the opposite from Yaakov. As a shepherd, you try to keep your flock, to protect them, where Esau is trying to catch them. So we see, according to the Rashbam, that basically Yaakov is the one to try to keep the legacy, where Esau tried to create, maybe I will not say deviate, but to create a different legacy. So we already see that Esau and Yaakov are choosing to do different things. So, in a way, if I would stop here, I would say that what are the reasons for Esau to deviate? So I can say its own thinking, his own perspective on the world around him, and says, look, I'm looking for something else, this is just not for me. Or B, he said, and I'm going to what? To try to mimic Nimrod. Or alternatively, he says, look, it's not for me to be a shepherd. It's boring. I want to do something much more active. This is just not my type of work, which is all Esau's doing. Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, in this fascinating Perush, opens up a totally different perspective on this story. And it says the following: ויגדלו הנערים. בשום מקום לא נמנעו חכמינו מלגלות חולשות ושגיאות, קטנות כגדולות, במעשי אבותינו הגדולים. He says, he's in Germany in the 19th century, and he says, no place in Tanakh that the Tanakh does not reveal sins, mistakes, deficiencies that our forefathers did, or our mothers. And why? דווקא על ידי כך הגדילו תורה והאדירו את לקחה לדורות. And by showing the deficiencies, the problems, the issues, the challenges, they made the Torah real. Think about it. If our forefathers and mothers were complete, were perfect, what can we learn from them? We are not perfect. But by knowing that they were not perfect, they will always try to improve, and they made mistakes, we can learn from it tremendous amount. So therefore, Rabbi Shimshon Raphael says, I am going to tell you now that someone made a mistake, and I'm going to explain to you what was the mistake, but just make sure to know that it's okay. It's not, God forbid, going against our avot and imaot. We need to obviously respect them, have tremendous kavod to them. They are the one who established the Jewish people. But it does not mean that they were perfect. There is no such a thing as perfect. We always have the aspiration to improve ourselves. Okay, so what was the problem here? אף כאן, הערה אחת שלהם מרמזת לנו, כי הניגוד העמוק שבין נכדי אברהם מקורו העיקרי היה לא רק בתכונותיהם. It says the Torah here highlight, emphasize, focus on one little detail that tells us that what? That the strike difference between Avraham's grandchildren, Esau and Yaakov, is not only because of their different personalities, different attributes, אלא גם בחינוכם הלקוי. They were badly educated. כל עוד היו קטנים, when they were little children, לא שמו לב להבדלי נטיותיהם הנסתרות. Their parents, Yitzchak and Rivka, didn't pay attention to the hidden inclinations that they both have. תורה אחת וחינוך אחד העניקו לשניהם, ושכחו כלל גדול בחינוך חנוך לנער על פי דרכו. It says Yitzchak and Rivka saw Esau and Yaakov as twins. They play together, they dress up together, they eat together, they are the same, and this is the mistake. Shlomo HaMelech says in Mishlei, in Proverbs, חנוך לנער, you should educate a youth על פי דרכו, based on his way. יש לכוון את החניך, you should direct, to lead, to channel the חניך, the student, בהתאם לדרכו המיוחדת לו בעתיד, based on the future, based on the way you see his future, where can he or she can contribute. ההולמת את התכונות והנטיות הרדומות בעמקי נפשו. By knowing what are the hidden passions and thoughts and aspiration that your student have. It's something incredible. You need to know your student. Don't make mistakes like, I know your brother, I know your sister, so you are the same. Wrong. Each person is olam umlo'o, is his own entire universe. The fact that someone comes as twins does not mean that they are the same. You need to know your student in order to be able to basically, almost like hand tailor, her or his way in education. וכן לחנך אותו לקראת המטרה הטהורה, האנושית והיהודית כאחת, in order to channel him, to guide him or her to this Jewish goal and universal goal. This is the pure goal that you want to lead your student. התפקיד היהודי הגדול אחד ויחיד בעיקרו. He says, the goal, the Jewish goal is one, אך דרכי הגשמתו רבות ורב גוניות. But in order to fulfill this goal, we have multiple ways. It's not just one way to reach that destination. כריבוי תכונות האדם, like we have different attributes, we have multiple attributes and personalities, וכרב גוניות דרכי חייהם. There is no such a thing that everyone is doing the same, thinking the same, dressed the same. You will not be able to reach that goal. That goal has different ways. And you need to understand that each person will choose, he or she will choose a different path. But you, as the educator, need to show them the main goal where all of us, from different directions, needs to what? Needs to try to aim our path to that specific goal. כאשר נקבצו בני יעקב לשמוע את ברכת אביהם, when all the children of Yaakov later on, obviously at the end of Sefer Bereshit, they came together in order to listen to their father's blessings, it says what? הלה ראה בהם את שבטי ישראל של העתיד. Yaakov looked at his children and he saw this is the future of the Jewish people. So what did he see? He saw לא ראה הכהנים ומורי הוראה. He didn't see only כהנים and teachers. הנה עמד שם שבט הלוויה ושבט המלוכה, שבט הסוחרים, שבט האיכרים ושבט הלוחמים. He looked and he saw Levi and he saw the priests. He saw Yehuda and he saw kings. He saw Issachar and he saw scholars. He saw Naphtali and he saw business people. He saw, I think it was Reuven, farmers. He saw warriors, Shevet Gad, Shevet Dan. He saw a multiple people with multiple attributes, with multiple aspirations. But what did he do? עמד שם לנגד עיניו העם כולו. He saw through his 12 children, he saw the entire nation, על סגולותיו הרב גוניות ועל כל דרכי התפתחותו. He saw the entire nation, which is comprised by different people, different agendas, different expertise. ואת כולם הוא ברך, איש אשר כברכתו ברך אותם. He gave a blessing to every child based on what? On their specific, special, unique attributes. איש איש כסגולותיו המיוחדות לו. He gave each tribe its own specific blessing, which helps him to fulfill his potential, his individual potential, his tribal potential, which will contribute to what? To the nation at large. כי ברית השם הכרותה עם אברהם, because God's covenant with Abraham, חפצה באומה בריאה. God's desire a healthy nation, שלמה, wholesome, רעננה, fresh, מטרתה לבנות חיי עם שלמים על כל צורותיהם הרב גוניות. The purpose is to build one nation that is comprised by multiple tribes. על מנת לכוון אותם אל התפקיד הגדול האחד. In order to direct everyone to this main goal, which is what Abraham was told to do. לשמור דרך השם, to keep, to safeguard God's path, לעשות צדקה ומשפט, to do what is right and just and judgment. הכוח, the power, the strength, האומץ, the courage, לא פחות מהמחשבה והרגש, not less than the thought and the feeling, the emotions. ימצאו שם את גיבוריהם העובדים להשם. Everyone serves God. The warrior in the war, the scholar, the businessman, the high-techist, the doctor, the accountant, the lawyer, the army, the soldier. the Talmid Yeshiva, all of us together, the painter, the artist, all of us together comprise what we call Am Avraham, Mishpachat Avraham, Brit Hashem. ובמקצועות שונים יקיימו כולם את התפקיד הגדול של הכלל. Each one of us will have his or her own expertise, which will contribute together to this large dream of לעשות צדקה ומשפט. דווקא משום כך, specifically because of that, חנוך לנער על פי דרכו. You should educate a youth based on his or her path. חנכהו למטרה הגדולה האחת על פי דרכו המיוחדת לו. בהתאם לעתיד הצפוי לו מנטיותיו, which means, you see someone who can't sit and learn. He wants to be a hunter. He wants to be a painter. He wants to be a doctor, an accountant, a lawyer. He wants to be something. He wants to be a journalist. He does not want to sit and learn Torah all day long. Educate him based on his attributes so he or she can continue to contribute in their specific unique way to what? To be part of the covenant, ללכת בדרך השם, לשמור דרך השם, to safeguard God's path, לעשות צדקה ומשפט. And now he gets to the issue that he has with יצחק and רבקה. המושיב את יעקב ועשיו על ספסל לימודים אחד. When you place Yaakov and Esau on the same bench, ובאותם הרגלי החיים מחנך אותם כאחד לחיי לימוד ומחשבה. And you teach both of them to be spiritual, to learn, to study all day. מובטח לו שאת האחד מהם הוא מקלקל. This is an awful comment on Yitzchak and Rivka. When you think that Esau and Yaakov are the same, and you teach them the same, not only that Esau will not learn anything, he will be mekulkal, which means you basically, in a way, destroy, you hurt, you damage his personality. יעקב ישאב ממעיין החוכמה בחפץ גובר והולך. Yaakov will be like a sponge. He will want more and more because that fits his attributes. ואילו עשיו רק יצפה ליום בו ישליך מאחורי גבו את הספרים הישנים. ויחד איתם תעודת חיים גדולה. Esau is just waiting for the day for his bar mitzvah that he can take the book that he received from the rabbi and throw it out of the window. And he's going to hunt. He can't wait to leave the school. ויחד איתם תעודת חיים גדולה שהכיר אותה רק באופן חד צדדי, בדרך שמעצם טבעו הוא סולט בה. His natural attribute was nothing to do with what he was learning in school. That's not him. If Yitzchak and Rivka would know Esau, they would know how to continue to keep him in the fold, but by teaching him something else. By the way, we cannot be oblivious, obviously, to the historical background for his commentary. In the 19th century in Germany, Rabbi Shimshon Raphael is trying to push what we call today modern orthodoxy, which is not, but basically is trying to tell his generation, look, we cannot seclude ourselves and just to learn Torah. A. B, we cannot just go and throw everything. We need to create schools that would educate rabbis to be scholars, both in Torah and in general studies, and we also need to teach our children that they can intertwine general studies, intense general studies with intense Judaic studies. So Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch continues on and says, אילו העמיקו יצחק ורבקה לחדור לנפש עשיו, if Yitzchak and Rivka will take the time to infiltrate Esav's neshama, Esav's soul, his thought process, his attributes, אילו הקדימו לשאול את עצמם, if they would ask themselves, איך יכולים גם האומץ, הכוח, הגמישות הרדומי בנפש עשיו, how can we harvest those attributes that Esav has, which is koach, power, courage, הגמישות, flexibility, in Esav's soul, איך יכולים כל אלו להטות שכם אחד לעבודת השם? If they would ask themselves, how can we navigate, channel, lead, bring, encourage Esau to bring those hidden inclinations that he has in order to bring him to this goal? כי אז הגיבור של העתיד לא היה הופך לגיבור ציד. So then this גיבור Esau, who was a גיבור, not necessarily will become a גיבור ציד, but rather גיבור לפני השם, באמת. He will be a hero who goes in front of God, which means he will be סיירת מטכ"ל. He will be someone, or he will be a businessman. He will be something else, not a Torah scholar, but still equally contributing to this dream, ideal, aspiration that we have. לשמור את דרך השם, to safeguard God's path, לעשות צדקה ומשפט. יעקב ועשיו על כל נטיותיהם השונות, יעקב ועשיו, despite all their differences, היו נשארים אחים תאומים ברוחם ובדרך חייהם. Esau and Jacob could have been good brothers. עוד מראשית הייתה חרבו של עשיו כורתת ברית עם רוחו של יעקב. Esau and Jacob not necessarily had to be enemies. Esau was good with his sword, Jacob was good with his studying. They could do it together. ומי יודע איזה שינוי היה צפוי לקורות הימים על ידי כך? This is what we call in America Monday morning quarterback, which means you say, what if? But Rab Shimshon Raphael Hirsch basically really saying it. He's saying if Yitzchak and Rivka will not make this educational mistake, it might be that the entire history was different. Can you imagine the medieval times without Esau trying to kill Yaakov? Or before that? Can you imagine Esau and Yaakov, both of them together, continue the legacy of Avram and Yitzchak? But for whatever reason, and Rab Shimshon Raphael Hirsch also knows all the midrashim, why Yaakov had to be chosen and Esau had to be rejected. But still, Rab Shimshon Raphael Hirsch highlight this educational mistake. And he says, אך לא כן היה. ויגדלו הנערים. רק מי שגדלו הנערים והיו לגברים, only when Esau and Yaakov grew up and became young adults, הופתעו הכל לראות, everyone was surprised. כי אלה אשר מרחם אחד יצאו, that both of them that came from the same mother, ויחד נתגדלו, and they were raised together, and they were educated together, היו כה שונים בטבעם ומנוגדים במעשיהם. They were so different. They were so different from birth. But dafka, specifically because of their differences. If Yitzchak and Rivka were able to see the difference, they will take Esau when he was a child and tell him, you want to hunt? You want to be a gibor? You want to be a worldly person and you don't want to sit as a scholar? That's fine. We are not against it. We will encourage you how to what? To intertwine these two worlds. How to be your brother's partner. And we also will educate your brother to appreciate your contribution. There is no such a thing as one size fits all. Everyone is the same, especially they are twins. Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch here highlights a tremendous educational lesson for every teacher, but even more of it to parents. We as parents we have tremendous privilege and tremendous responsibility to know our children, not to compare them. If your older brother or older sister did A, you need to do A too. No. This is a fatal mistake. Not only that we will not be able to educate them, we're going to ruin them. We need to do what Rabbi Shimshon Raphael here says. Chanoch lana'ar al pi darko, quoting from Shlomo HaMelech, from King Solomon. We need to know your student. You need to know your son. You need to know your daughter. You need to know your grandchildren. You need to know them in order to lead them to what? To this ideal. לשמור דרך Hashem, to safeguard God's path. לעשות צדקה ומשפט. To do what is right and what is just. Rav Soloveitchik has a different perspective. And he said the following. Modern Western man has much in common with the biblical Esau. Like Esau, modern man also relies exclusively on his own efforts and refuses to acknowledge God's hand in his fate. 20th century man is guilty of being an ish sadeh, of allowing the pursuit of wealth, comfort, and fame to overtake his life and define his very essence. Rav Soloveitchik, like many other commentators, took a phrase and tried to make it relevant. So he says the Ish Sadeh, the person who is the worldly person, is the modern 20th century person who is looking for wealth, for power, for glory, for fame, very much like Esau. The accumulation of wealth has become an end unto itself, an end that justifies virtually all means. People feel responsible only for themselves and their fortunes, and allow themselves to trample over others during their frantic pursuit of affluence. Jewish tradition teaches us to instead follow the example of Jacob, whom the Torah here describes as an ish tam yoshev ohalim, a simple man dwelling in tents. Jacob's simplicity cannot possibly refer to simple-mindedness or naivete. After all, over the course of his life, he managed to outmaneuver both his murderer's brother and his indicious uncle, yet Lavan. Rather, Jacob's simplicity manifested itself in the nature of his lifestyle, which was characterized by humility and contentment. In direct contradistinction to Esau, Jacob felt no need to pursue luxury or prominence. He felt perfectly content dwelling in his tents of study, learning and practicing the laws of God, pursuing spiritual excellence rather than material excess, understanding what his brother could not, that our sustenance and very lives depends upon divine grace. Jacob invested his energies in the service of God rather than devoting himself to the pursuit of material gain. This commentary of Rav Soloveitchik, on one hand, can be understood in a very simple way. We shouldn't have anything with the world around us, or really the external world. We should sit in the tent and learn Torah. That's not what Rav Soloveitchik suggests. He suggests that we need to be more Yaakov in the Esau that we have, which means no one can deny that we need to go and work. We need to contribute to this world. We need to have a profession. If we chose not to be Torah scholars, there are other things that we can do in order to contribute to this world. The problem is, and this is an issue that we have in our modern society, is that the pursuit of professional life is not only just to save people, to help humanity. It's about the money. And then you become an ish sadeh. You become a man of the field. You basically, in a way, submit your lifestyle, your thoughts, your morality and ethics to this new entity that we created, which is called wealth. Money is important. Wealth is important. Accumulation of wealth is fine. The Torah has nothing against accumulation of wealth. The Torah has something against making wealth, money, fortune, treasures, gold, silver, to make it your God. If you accumulate wealth and you remember the needy, the poor, the other people in society that are not as fortunate as you, that's fine. Not a problem. The problem becomes when you basically serve your own wealth. That's why we need Yaakov. Yaakov is someone who created tremendous wealth. Not only that, Rav Soloveitchik does not say it, but I will add to it. One of the promises that God makes to Yaakov, when you and your descendants will be in Mitzrayim, he made it to Avraham, and it was fulfilled with Yaakov's children, is what? Yetz'u b'rechush gadol. They will come out with tremendous wealth. This is a sign that they are going to be successful. That's not a problem. The problem is, this is a very difficult question. What is the essence of our lives? Is that the wealth, or is that Torah values, divine values? There should not be a contradiction. You can do both. We can do both. It just takes a lot of efforts for that from time to time you stop and you ask yourself, am I only an ish sadeh? Am I only just the man of the field? If I'm only, or my only care in life is how can I make more money for the sake of making more money? Or my question is how can I make more money to better my life, but also to help others, to contribute more, to give more tzedakah, to help more the needy, change society, change the future. If you are a Yaakov and Esau together, and Yaakov is the principal, is the successor, Esau can definitely dwell with Yaakov. So, little different than Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, where Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch sees Esau and Yaakov as really like always working together, Rav Soloveitchik. And again, there is some historical background. At the 60s in America, in the US, there is obviously some kind of an inclination that Rav Soloveitchik saw that he needs to say something about it. He saw that there is more of an inclination towards the wealth and the money and the accumulation of wealth and forgetting a bit, Yaakov Ishtam Yoshev Ohalim. So he had to tell his people, he had to tell his Kehillah, he had to tell society, you are going the wrong direction. Focus on Yaakov, not necessarily in the limited perspective of you need to sit and study. No, I'm not talking about that. He's talking about the humility, the understanding of your right priorities. What is right? What is my main goal? What is the secondary goal? What is the third goal? One of the first mistakes we do is that when we reverse priorities, and then number one becomes number five, and number five becomes number one. So according to Rav Soloveitchik, Yaakov and Esau can go together only when you know that Yaakov is the main idea or the main model. Humility, submission, understanding that tents are also good. It's also fine. I don't need to build a mansion. A tent which is comfortable will be also good. So that's Rav Soloveitchik's perspective. But if that's true, we have something very interesting here. The Torah states, "Vayehav Yitzchak et Esav ki tzayid befiv." Yitzchak loved Yitzchak. Why? Because he brings those animals to Yaakov, to Yitzchak. V'Rivka ohevet et Yaakov. And Rivka loves Yaakov, Jacob. Now, leave alone that this itself is a tremendous educational mistake where parents start basically dividing their love, which seems to be probably very obvious that Yitzchak really loves Esau and Rivka really loves Yaakov. But what does it mean? How it came about? So take a look. Again, Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch says, he immediately jumps on it, and he says the following. רגשות ההורים היו חלוקים ביחס לבניהם. The parents' feelings and emotions were divided in their attribute, in their association, in their kesher, in their connection to their children. אף זו עובדה שלא יכלה להשפיע על הטובה. He says, Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch says, you don't need to be an expert to understand that definitely does not influence the children in a good manner, in a good way. When I know that my mother loves me and my father not exactly, or if I know my father loves me and my mother is not exactly, obviously the feelings there are not great. אחדות דעות ביחס לחינוך אהבה שווה לכל הבנים, גם אלה לקויים במידותיהם, הזקוקים לאהבה מסורה עוד יותר מהחולים בגופם. הם תנאי היסוד ואבני הפינה לכל חינוך. Unbelievable. Such an educator. Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch says, he says, parents must to have unity when they come to educate their children. You need to equally love everyone, even if one of the children deviates, even if one of the children is what we call off the derech. The children must feel that they are equally loved. And sometimes, dafka those, specifically those who are not exactly on the same path, they need even more love, they need more encouragement. אמנם בכוח המשיכה של הניגודים נוכל להבין בנקל את אהבת יצחק אל עשיו ואהבת רבקה אל יעקב. He says, but if you understand what we call אהבת הניגודים, which means you love someone who is in a way exactly your opposite, we can understand why Esau was loved by Yitzchak and Yaakov was loved by Yaakov. Why? Because Yitzchak שהיה עולה תמימה, התרחק מהמולת העולם. Yitzchak was an עולה תמימה. He was almost sacrificed on הר המוריה. He couldn't really communicate with this world. והעדיף את נאות השקט בבאר לחי רועי, על פני החברה האנושית ההומייה. He preferred to seclude himself in a quiet place rather than to be engaged with the world. ייתכן שהוא אהב את אופיו של עשיו, העז ונועז במעשיותו, המסוגל להנהיג את הבית בכישרון שעלה על שלו. And that's maybe why Yitzchak loved Esau, because he was exactly his opposite. When Yitzchak thought about who should be his successor, he says, definitely not someone who looks like me and acts like me, which is Yaakov. I need to love Esau more. I need to encourage him. I need to make him his successor because he's the person who can take it out, who can really carry out this legacy on his shoulders. כנגדו, but exactly the opposite. רבקה ראתה ביעקב את הדמות השלמה. רבקה saw in Yaakov this perfect, wholesome person. הרחוקה בתכלית מכל מושגי בית אביה. Someone who is totally distant from her father. Depends where you come from. אהדתה של יצחק ורבקה מובנת. He says, we can justify it. We can understand why Yitzchak loves Esau because he's contrary, he's exactly his opposite. And Rivka loves Yaakov because he's her father's opposite. We can justify it. However, says Rab Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, אהדתם של יצחק ורבקה מובנת, we can understand it. אך אל להורים לכוון את חינוכם על יסוד רגשות עמומים ומעורפלים כאלה. But parents cannot, should not, must not base their education to their children based on emotions like that. You need to know your children. Don't educate your children based on feelings and emotions or this natural thing that I love someone who is exactly the opposite for me. The Sfat Emet, the Gera Rebbe, says the following: ויאהב יצחק את עשיו כי ציד בפיו. And Yitzchak loved Esau because there is a tzid, there is a hunt in his mouth. Sfat Emet, like all the commentators, ask himself, how come? How can we explain that Yitzchak loves Esau? What, he didn't see that Esau is a villain, that Esau is not the right person based on all the midrashim? So says the Sfat Emet. הכתוב נותן טעם כי לא היה אהבה אמיתית. It was not a true love. רק תלויה בדבר. לכן בטל דבר, בטלה אהבה. The Sfat Emet says, the Torah gives a reason. It says, יצחק, ויאהב יצחק את עשיו כי, what is כי? Because ציד בפיו, because he brings this hunt, ורבקה אוהבת את יעקב, and רבקה loves Yaakov. Why? The narrative does not give a reason. There is no key, there is no because. Says Sfat Emet, the word because the word ki means what? That the love that Yitzchak had towards Esau was dependent on what? On some kind of an exchange. Esau brought something, and because he brought something, Yitzchak loved him. But Rivka loved Yaakov. She loved himself, his personality, his essence. ולכן כשהקדימו יעקב בצידה, עבדה אהבה. And therefore, says the Sfat Emet, which is really an amazing, simple explanation, he says when Yitzchak was hungry, and Yaakov comes along with the dinner, and he says to him, who are you? He says, oh, I'm Esau. He says, okay, I'll take the dinner. Basically, it's not that he loved Esau. He lacked the functionality of Esau, which means he is a provider of my dinner every night. But I don't necessarily like Esau more than I like Yaakov. אבל רבקה אוהבת את יעקב בלי טעם. But Rivka loved Yaakov with no reason. ונתקיימה האהבה לעד. And that's why it was an eternal love. וכן כוונת המדרש, and this is what the Midrash says, במה שכתב, כל שהייתה שומעת קולו הייתה מוספת אהבה. That when every time that Rivka heard Yaakov, she loved him even more. פירוש שלא היה תלוי בדבר. Which means Rivka loved Yaakov because of who he was. Not because of his functionality or because of what he did. She loved him. וכן אהבת המקום ברוך הוא לבני ישראל. גם כן אינה תלויה בדבר אף לא במעשיהם. The Sfat Emet says this is also a model for God's love to us. It's not necessarily because of what we do, even though when we don't do what he asks us to do, he's angry and he can punish us. But he loves us not because of what we do. רק בחר לו חלק השם עמו, but Hashem chose us to be his people. כמו שכתב עליו, עשיר ישמח בחלקו. A wealthy person will be happy in his lot. We are God's lot. וזה שאמר, and this is what the pasuk says, אהבתי אתכם. Hashem used the expression, I love you. Not I love what you do, not I love what you bring me, I love you. אמרתם במה אהבתנו, and then the Jewish people responded to God, how exactly did you love us? הלא אח עשיו ליעקב, פירוש שאין טעם במה לתלות האהבה, רק שבני ישראל מדובקים אליו יתברך בשורשם. Basically, Hashem says to them, אח עשיו ליעקב. Esau is Yaakov's brother. But I love you not because of what you do like Esau, but I love you. So leave alone this beautiful drush at the end, which brings tremendous comfort. But I think what the Sfat Emet is basically saying is, we as parents need to make a very clear distinction when we show love to our children. Do we love them? Do we encourage them because of what they do or because of who they are? I think that these different interpretations that we saw today brings many questions. I will not, I will not even say questions. I would say things to ponder about them. As parents, as educators, how well do we know our students? As parents, how well do we know our children? What kind of lines of communication we created since they were young so they can communicate with us and we can communicate them and we can really infiltrate their inner world in order to be able to show everyone this ideal of לשמור דרך Hashem, to safeguard God's path, לעשות צדקה ומשפט, but to let them and help them and encourage them to use their unique attributes to get there with our encouragement and by themselves. How do we make sure that when we are successful people in the financial world, how do we make sure not to forget that we are ish tam yoshev ohalim, that we never lose sight of the people who are less fortunate than us, that we never lose sight of our real main goal to make this world a better place? How do we harmonize? How do we harvest all those different powers, all those different attributes to create something that God believed that Abraham's descendants can do? And how do we basically understand, internalize the idea that God loves us, not only because of what we do. Even if we don't do much, God might be upset, but he still loves us. So I think today we learned from our avot and imaot some tremendous educational lessons that we should try to internalize in order to be able to help our children maximize their potential and walking on the path, לשמור דרך Hashem, to safeguard God's path, לעשות צדקה ומשפט, to do what is right and what is just. Thank you.